And people can begin to stand up and can now ask your questions that we stopped before. No, you go up to the microphone, please. And others, but clearly you have a passion for what you're doing and an enthusiasm which just carries through. Okay.
I loved your presentation, but you know, as a left coaster, I have to say, it really felt like a East Coast presentation, and let me tell you why. You know, I think that it is certainly true that patents have a great deal to do with commercialization, but out on the West Coast, not so much. And so what I worry about sort of metrizing success of technology transfer offices from patent applications is that it wouldn't capture the Googles, the Yahoos, and a lot of software, basically, which is really not on the patent model. I think it's good for, you know, for the pharma, it's good for, and so to me, I think, and certainly at Berkeley, we've really got our patent office to know that a success of a patent office is not directly proportional to the number of patents. And I suspect you do too, but it's not. It's a lot harder to metrize the other kinds of startups. But I think in this valley of death, but the reasons it comes up is because I think that if you're too attached to patents and so on, it's too much about the tech push that Dean talked about. If people don't want the stuff and the customer pull and the getting out of the building, which I think is really the bigger part of the commercialization than the development of the technology, you know, I think it sort of limits what you can do in tech transfer offices. So I hope that when we talk about ERICs and ERCs or whatever, we really think about creating that ecosystem. And I sort of nodding, it seems like you agree. The second thing I should say is, I think in our rush to be interested in entrepreneurism, I fear that too many of us in a university are getting excited about nurturing companies and holding on to them and not letting the market kill off ones that deserve to be killed off. And we should really draw a line about where sort of our educational mission ends, the acceleration ends, and the market takes over. So I'd love to get your comments on all of those.
So if I could jump in. So actually, I couldn't agree more. To be clear, patents are not the end-all, be-all, or even the majority of most startups. That is disproportionate. That is not equally true in all industries. So in software, and especially consumer software, that is much less true. Although I will note that Google actually was a patent license through the Stanford Tech Transfer Office, as an aside. But it certainly didn't drive most of the value they have. If you are interested in the topic, on our website, techventures.columbia.edu, there's a whole variety of interviews we've done with venture capitalists, actually with Michelle Lee from the USPTO and others, on the role that patents play in startups. And it is important in some and not in others. I think what you'll likely hear from all of our institutions, and probably from yours as well, is that the support that we provide, the entrepreneurship support, the commercialization support, the connections to industry and venture capital, aren't limited to just the ones that we have patents on. We're trying to help as many technologists as we can get out of the university. Intellectual property, just since you invited the tech transfer people, and since there was a lot of concerns around intellectual property that were raised earlier, that's naturally the focus. It's also countable. But to your point, you don't want to make sure that everyone files patents on every single thing just to get a metric. That would be a terrible outcome, a waste of money and possibly dampening innovation, not helping it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Obviously, patents, I mean, if you get the impression here that patents were the it thing, that it's not at all. It's just a tool to get to an outcome, which is to transfer technology that's early stage to the commercial sector. And the fact of the matter is in many startup situations, if you don't have a patent portfolio that's decent, the investment won't come, because that's what the sort of the security blanket is. If you invest in this technology, at least it's a big risk because it's early stage again, but then you own that piece of the market.
But especially if you look at I'm happy to talk to anyone about our fixed startup terms afterwards, but as you'll tell when you hear them, there's almost no cash in the early years. Everything is deferred. There's actually very little cash in the later years later. It's royalties and equity. That's essentially largely it for us. But in fields like advanced materials, bioengineering, tissue engineering, there's plenty of fields where patents really are incredibly important, and the startups can't get funding without it. But biopharma especially.
Hey, real quick, Andrew Lee here. There were University of Illinois. A couple of things that came up. So, Dean, you remember when you talked about the top reasons startups fail? Yeah. So number one was that you don't know what the customer is. Number three was lack of focus. Okay, and this is the same. Getting back to what I was asking Pramod earlier today. What's your most important thing? And I'm looking for some feedback here. I think Fred had suggested, well, you could take 10%, some X percent of your budget if you're an ERC, and put it towards commercialization. I think I heard earlier today, you take 10%, 15%, and you put it towards some other thing. After a while, you don't have that much left to take care of your most important thing. It is very easy to say, we'll tack on one more thing. We'll tack on one more thing. And you very quickly end up in that number three category, possibly even taking your eye off the ball for number one and going after something that is not your path actually to success. And I haven't heard too much talked about that here, but as a new ERC director, this is one of the things that I'm thinking about. What is my most important thing? Okay, and if you talk to a VC or you're doing a business plan, that has to be crystal clear in your mind. What is the top thing, the need that you're trying to solve? As you've heard people talk today, do you get a sense for what is the most important thing? Where would you put sort of? I know you were asked to talk about this. Where would you put sort of the entrepreneurship and developing IP and spinning out in that sort of list of things that were brought up this morning? The four things. Is it number two? Is it number four? Is it something like that? Give me a sense to know whether or not I am focusing on the most important thing.
Something quick, and then I'll throw it to you guys. So both Fred and Oren, but Oren in particular mentioned that they've been doing a lot of the lean launchpad, which is essentially the customer discovery and I-Core stuff, because it is so inexpensive to go out and talk to people compared to doing research. You don't have to hire anybody. It's just, you got to make some cold calls. It's hard, but you can learn so much on very, very little money doing that initial customer discovery to realize that kids won't use your thing and your MRI machine or whatever else. And then it makes their jobs easier for the more expensive things when they have to actually file for patents and so on. So I would say if you're starting new ERC, have customer discovery built in somewhere. It'll cost you virtually nothing, and you'll pay tremendous dividends.
So I'm not sure I agree with that aspect. I do believe, and I come from a basic research place, that's number one, and never takes precedence over anything we do in licensing and patenting and startups. That's number one goal. That's what makes the name of the institution. The people who actually, the researchers are the ones who carry the place. And so I think that an ERC also has a fundamental research number one goal. I heard it's number one, and that's what it's about. If you stop everything else, this is the one you should do. My suggestion was, okay, after 5 years of an ERC, you may have 3 or 4 seeds of interesting things. After that, what happens? You get into the valley, so could there be some funding to help, additional funding to these 2 or 3 interesting ideas to take them to the next step? And at that point, I think it's important to go out, see what the market is looking for and needs. But I've seen how the fundamental research and basic research can bring really disruptive technologies that are not driven by what the market needs, because people are going out and dreaming up things that, curiosity-driven research, we heard about that earlier, and that creates the true breakthroughs combined with then directing them to the market. So
yeah, I completely agree. If this were, we are an afterthought for the pushing the boundaries of knowledge forward from our perspective. Mm-hmm. So that's clearly the most important. I think what you hear, though, our philosophy at Columbia, and I'm guessing it's the same at the other institutions, is very much about run as many cheap experiments as you can that make life better. And so you may decide that having a large patent budget to hold patents on absolutely everything for this early stage stuff is not that important. But through our experiments, we've learned you can run we call it the Columbia Technology Ventures Fellows Program and have 35 graduate students available to help people start companies and do invention assessments and all that stuff. And you can run it with the senior ones training the junior ones and managing them for $100,000 a year for all 35 graduate students. And these folks go on to careers in venture capital and industry, et cetera. Our XIR program, where we have 5 or 6 seasoned executives in our office rotating through every semester, costs a grand total of $50,000 a year to run. So these kinds of programs support the 100 or so startups coming out of Columbia overall a year, not just the tech transfer ones, and don't cost that much. Which one's right for your institution is only something that you can say. But a lot of these are cheap or free.
So we have about 2 minutes left.
So I'm Deborah Jackson at the ERC program office. I'm going to cede to my boss here because he's got
I get a pressing one, and Mario Rotte.
Can I still talk?
Yes, sure, you will, because I'll be very brief. I'm the Division Director of Engineering Education and Centers, which in some ways is going to be the recipient of this product as a division at NSF. And to answer Andrew's question, I hope that if there are ERC directors here, under the current cooperative agreements, they need to ask us what is the #1 thing to do. Yeah. So that's point 1. Point 2, I want to make it abundantly clear what Pramod said this morning. It's not about evaluating the ERC. It's not about incremental changes to the ERC. This is about the next 30 years of the ERC program, okay? ERC has evolved over 30 years. It is what it is. Now we want to take a fresh look and see what it's going to look like the next 30 years. He answered this morning what was the most important question, #1. So take that as context to continue the conversations. Thank you.
And last question.
Customer discovery, by the way, right there. You found out what your customer wants.
I-Core.
Hossein Mahmoud, Colorado State University. I have a question for the panel. What do you do about the issue of talking to the customer about what you have, but not seeing the customer, not seeing what you're seeing? You know, the customer is too confined to the traditions of the way we do things.
That's that big chunk of the pie, #1.
And that's, for example, structural engineering is too confined to the way we do things. And I had an idea of developing a structure system based on how your lung is suspended and how the lung manages to take on physical activities without taking damage. And when I told the AISC about it, American Institute of Steel Construction, they laughed. They looked at me and said, "A flying slab? We don't think so." And they killed it right on the spot. I still continued with the idea, but this is a big issue that I'd like to hear your opinion on this.
I think you see the limit of this process, okay? The most disruptive ideas, nobody will think that work. Say, you're crazy. Okay, Google started up with a search engine. The heck, who's going to do?
The 12th search engine.
Exactly,
The first.
exactly. So you have to, this is what the passion of the inventor, the person who's going to drive this through, the instincts, all these things that the 3 circles earlier, desirability and all that, come into play. You have to believe in your thing, and the most successful entrepreneurs are the ones who never took no for an answer.
I disagree with that. I mean, even the most successful entrepreneurs have failed plenty of companies. Steve Blank has created multiple companies. So it's a combination of all of the above. There's no right answer, right? I mean, you have to be passionate. You have to not be willing to take no for an answer. And you can either be a master salesman like a Steve Jobs and warp people into believing that they should buy something, but more likely, if you have a true understanding of what people's problems or needs are, and you can satisfy that, but not bias them but you have to get used to this new crazy idea. Leave the new crazy idea out and just focus on their problems and needs.
It's your vision. If you have a vision that people don't share for whatever reason, because they're still, the market is behind, looking backwards. You are looking forward a lot of times. So to create the innovations that are going to be here, useful and necessary 10 years from now, people don't see it. Visionaries do that.
Yeah. Although on the other hand, you could be hearing no because they're wrong, or you could be hearing no because they're right and you're wrong. And it's very hard to know in that valley which one you are.
Exactly.
So just for the note, we continued the work and we published the paper, and they liked it actually afterwards, but we didn't get the funding. So.
Okay, well, again, I want to thank the panel. Now, you return to the same room and groups that you were before, and then there'll be posters, and then everybody should be in their seats by 4:15 when John Holdren, who is the science advisor to the president and the head of OSTP, will be here because he has a short window. So